Hey everyone, this is Jaden Haidar, aka Spidey Fan 101, and I'm here today to review, or at least attempt to review, the Miss Marvel show. Now, as you guys know, I absolutely love Kamala Khan. She is a part of my big three, aka my three favorite characters of all time. You know, Peter Parker, Kamala Khan, America Chavez. And I have read every last one of her comics. And I absolutely love her journey. And I not only love Kamala Khan, but I love the characters that surround Kamala Khan as well. Like Bruno, Nakia, Zoe, Mike, aka Michaela, Abu, Ami, Amir, Taisha's brother. You know, even the smaller characters like the halal guy, and you know, like they in the comics, I just got so invested in all of their stories, not just Kamala's, but in all of their stories. And I absolutely love the comics. That is like that story with those characters are so close to my heart. And it means a lot to me. Their story means a lot to me. So, when I heard that they were making a Miss Marvel show, I was originally like, because I've always wanted to see a Kamala Khan show, especially like back when Marvel Rising was coming out and she was like one of the primary main characters of that show. You could argue that she was the main character of that series of films. And around time where she would cameo in the Spider-Man 2017 show a lot, and she had a cool like friendship with Peter and everything, and she was also prevalent in Avengers Assemble, and you know it's like Marvel Animation at the time was like getting ready to give her a show, and it was like really exciting because she was showing up everywhere, and that was kind of like, you know, the gist or the hint, like they were eventually going to give her own show. But then obviously Feige got in control and everything. I'm not going to talk about all that because you could hear that in my recent Marvel Studios video. But I heard that they were making a show about my girl Kamala. Marvel Studios was. And if you've been with my channel, you know from the videos that I've made talking about this show that I have not been a fan of the direction that they took. I was not a fan of the power change. I was not a fan. I was not a fan and am still not a fan of the power change. I was not a fan of the things I was hearing in terms of how they changed up the story. I was not a fan of any of it. So when the first trailer came out, and I saw what I saw, as you guys know who have seen the video, I turned to Ghost Rider. I freaked out. And I don't regret a single word that I said in that video. Even though I ended up reneging because I sort of got the Ben 10 syndrome. Because for people that don't know, the Ben 10 syndrome for me was when the reboot was coming out, right? And as a kid, Ben 10 was and still is one of my all-time favorite franchises or should I say sagas, that really like showed me what storytelling or character-driven storytelling can be. And that saga, along with some other sagas too, really showed me like the true extent of how amazing and immersive storytelling can be. And then the reboot came out and made Ben 10 a complete joke, and you know, it was horrible. And even though it was bad and I knew it was bad, I kept trying to give it a chance because the Ben 10 fan within me wanted to enjoy it, wanted it to be good, wanted it to be something that was worth my time. But it never was. And that was until the last episode of the reboot, where ironically was the one where they started bringing back elements from the original Ben 10 saga. So, it was the full-on Ben 10 syndrome where I gave the show a chance because I wanted to believe that it would be good. And the thing is, the show started out really good, right? Like, the first episode, I genuinely believe is a masterpiece. Like, that first episode is so good and is so faithful to the story of Kamala Khan. And, it was just great. And then the second episode was good too, especially when it comes to Nakia. Because, like, Nakia was probably, like, my favorite character in this iteration of in this show. Because she was the one that I felt, above all else, was always the most accurate to the character that I know and love from the comics. And she was great. But then, around the third episode, something started to happen. Even though I was slowly getting more and more annoyed with the power change, even though I was slowly starting to get more and more annoyed by the plots they were starting to introduce with the clandestines, I noticed, especially when I found out that the show is going to be 6 episodes long, that's when the show started to get bad for me. Because the show has this issue of, on one hand, being so accurate and faithful that's like on Scott Pilgrim versus the World, and like it's on that level of accuracy. But on the other hand, when it's bad, it gets really bad, like on Last Airbender, Dragon Ball Evolution type bad. Like it was constantly going on that seesaw of being really good and accurate and being really bad and unfaithful. And I think that's my main issue with the show. Because let me get into the characters real quick. Kamala, as a character, like Iman Vellani, in terms of the live action, the first ever live iteration of this character, great job. She did a great job, and I feel like there are a lot of people that I would have chosen to play Kamala Khan. I've had a lot of fan castings over the years, but Iman proved herself. She was kind of like Sochi in a way, to where she proved herself in the way that, she proved all my doubts to be wrong. And even when I was like not happy with the show back before, when I was hearing like the rumors and what the costume looked like and everything like that, I said that Iman Vellani was not my issue. She was never my issue. And, she did a great job. She was great. I thought like the emotional scenes were a little iffy sometimes. But overall, I thought she was great. I thought she was really great. She put her all into it. You could tell she put her heart and soul into it. And you could tell she is quite clearly a super fan of this character. And she loves this character. And she gets what this character is about. And you could see that while she is on screen being Kamala Khan. And I appreciate that. Her iteration. It's like I would be so happy to say that she is the definitive Kamala Khan for me. But the reason why she is not is solely because of the changes they made. Because especially when, in my eyes, she's going up against Marvel Rising Kamala Khan, Avengers video game Kamala Khan, Avengers Assemble Kamala Khan, Marvel Spider-Man Kamala Khan. There are so many great iterations of Kamala Khan in media that have already existed. It's not like My Girl America, where the only iterations out there are Marvel Rising America and Sochi's America. No, there are already so many Kamala Khans out there in media. Even Spidey and His Amazing Friends Kamala Khan. So when she ranks in terms of all those iterations, I would say she's probably in 4th place, because, you know, for me, well, actually no, 3rd. But then, because I really did enjoy the iteration of her that was in like Avengers Assemble and Marvel Spider-Man, but I feel like, because my top 3 iterations of Kamala Khan are Marvel Rising Kamala Khan at number 1, then it's Avengers video game Kamala Khan at number 2, and then I put Iman's Kamala Khan number 3, because even though she gets Kamala down spirit-wise and characteristic-wise, those changes just don't do it for me. And even though I don't mind certain changes, like her being a mutant instead of an Inhuman, even though obviously I would love for her to be an Inhuman like she's supposed to be, but when it comes to what we have, it's better than nothing in my eyes. Or it's better than that stupid bangle and all that other crap. So I'd be more than willing to take that instead of either nothing or that bangle crap. So for me, I'd say her iteration at number 3. I thought she was really good in the show. She has a lot of potential for this character in the future. And, you know, a part of me hopes that this show does come back, because I feel like there is a lot of potential, especially where the show leaves off, to where it can slowly train. Even though this season had a lot of bumps in the road, I feel like future seasons could make things better and could course correct. But, you know, who knows? But yeah, and then Bruno, the guy that played him, my apologies, I forgot his name, but I thought he was good as well. However, I noticed something while I was watching it, and while I was watching him play Bruno, and while I was watching it, I noticed that throughout most of the episodes, he had a lot of Tom Holland energy, and there were more times where I saw him more as Peter Parker than Bruno Corelli. And when I heard certain things, like he originally auditioned for the role of my boy Peter, but then lost to Tom Holland, I'm like, okay, that makes sense. But Bruno Corelli is not Peter Parker. He is Bruno Corelli. So, you know. And again, I thought he did a great job, but this iteration of Bruno, I really do have issues with, because he didn't get nearly as much time as he deserved. And that's going to be a running theme when I talk about more characters in the show. But, you know, with Bruno, he didn't nearly get as much time as he deserved. Because in the comics, Bruno is such a great character with his own story, with his own progression. And by the time we get to like the Magnificent Miss Marvel Volume 3, from the first ever volume to the Magnificent Miss Marvel Volume 3, you can see the difference. You can see how much he's progressed. I mean, you can see how much all the characters progressed, of course. But, you know, Bruno was one of the characters that went through like a real, like, progression. That was so well written and so well realized, to the point where when you look back, you're like, this was such a great journey for him. And, you know, I feel like they did it so haphazardly in this show. Now, granted, I'm guaranteeing you a lot of that was the restrictions due to the 6-episode thing. And that's a whole nother thing that I'll talk about later on. But yeah. And then the Caltech stuff with Bruno, that was super, like, what even was that? You can't tell me that was a plot, because that not only was that barely focused on, but it didn't feel like there was any impact. Because, like, let's say like if this was season 3 of this show, right? And ignoring the first episode, if this was season 3 of this show and you had this plot line, it would have hit so much harder, because we would have gotten to know these characters and see them we would have gotten to know these iterations of the characters in such a different way, so that when Bruno gets accepted into Caltech and he has to, like, find the courage to tell Kamala that he has to leave and go to Caltech, it hits harder. Like, there's a difference between the scene in the comics where Bruno goes to college in Wakanda versus this where he is going to Caltech. Like, there's a difference, because in the comics he's been there with Kamala the whole time, but in that particular circumstance, you know, their relationship had gotten so complicated, especially to events that were going on, to the point where he was like, I can't do this anymore, I can't be around you anymore, I have to go away to a different college in Wakanda, or to a different high school in Wakanda, should I say. And that really broke Kamala's heart, because this was her best friend and potential love of her life that was going away because of her, because he was mad at what she failed to do, which I'm not going to get into here, but because I've explained the whole Civil War II thing numerous times in multiple videos. But it was a heart-wrenching moment that lasted for multiple, like, volumes. But with this, because this is the first season and you're doing this now, there's no investment, because we haven't spent barely any time with these iterations of the characters. So for me, that whole plotline just felt hollow. And unfortunately, whereas Bruno was such a compelling a great character in the comics, he was non-existent here, and he could have been a lot better. But going to a character that I did like very much was, again, Nakia. I thought that Nakia was done so much justice in the show, even though she also unfortunately falls under the category of being wasted. I feel like she was the only one whose arc felt like, whose plotline, I shouldn't say arc, but whose plotline felt like it was significant. Because, you know, it's very much so within the vein of her character to want to make a difference in her community and to, like, go for a position like being like one of the front runners at the mosque, because, you know, she's a character that is the activist type. She wants to better the world that she's in, and not only that, but she wants to feel pride in herself. And I thought that she did that so well. And Yasmin Fletcher, she, again, I struggle to call live action iterations, especially from Marvel Studios of all places. I struggle to call iterations of characters like that definitive, unless it's like Sochi. But I would say that besides the comics iteration, Nakia in media, this is her. This is Nakia. This is the Nakia that I know and love. And Yasmin Fletcher did such a great job bringing this character to life, bringing all of her core values, beliefs, and everything into this iteration of the character. And I really appreciate that. The only real gripes I had with her character is the fact that she wasn't given enough time. And that's really it. Like, she was, like, if you had given her more time, sorry if you could hear that car alarm in the back, neighbors are annoying, but if she was given more time to flourish in the show, I feel like she would have been absolutely perfect. And then when it comes to Zoe, this character butchering was so hard to watch, because they turned Zoe from being such a complex and truly amazing character that went on her own journey of self-discovery after Secret Wars, and really started looking at herself from within and realizing, trying to figure out who she is as a person and what she wants from her life. This version of Zoe is not it, because literally she starts off as a bully, and then after she gets saved by Kamala in the first episode, she becomes like a Miss Marvel simp, you know? Like, she's not a character that stands on her own. She's not a character that goes through a journey. She was just there. And that's so disappointing, especially knowing who the real Zoe is and what journey she went through. And, you know, it was just extremely disheartening to see what this show did to Zoe. Like, it was so unfortunate. But I thought her family, like, you know, Abu, Ami, Amir, Taisha, they were all great. I mean, I thought Ami and Abu were kind of inconsistent in terms of the values that they had. But, you know, I thought, and they were very different from the comics. Like, especially Abu. Like, literally, like, I would call this version of Abu Santa Abu. Because literally, he's like Abu if he had, like, the charisma of Santa Claus. Like, literally, that's how I would describe his character. Like, happy all the time. Because when it comes to the comics, it's not like he didn't have moments where he was happy, but it just felt like he was more, like, chill, while also being nonchalant and strict. Not as strict as Ami, but he had his moments where he was strict, especially when he found out Kamala's identity. But in this, like, he was just, like, happy, like, all the time. It was weird. But Ami, I felt, was kind of inconsistent, because she went from being the stern motherly figure that she was in the comics to overly trusting in one scene, and it felt like her emotions and actions changed on a whim because the plot required it. And I didn't really care for that much. But Amir was perfect. So was Taisha. Those two were perfect. I have nothing bad to say about them. They were amazing. Perfect. Absolute perfection. But and like I said before, the first 2 episodes were absolutely fantastic. Even though I had issues with them because of the changes to the powers and everything like that. Those were the only issues I had. Literally, the first 2 episodes, besides the power change, were perfect. And I absolutely loved the first 2 episodes. And to a degree, the finale, even though it was very much so rushed, just like a finale in this type of setting would be. I feel like for what they did, first of all, it caught at my nostalgia strings. Well, not really nostalgia strings, but just my fanboy strings, because there's something cool about seeing, Kamala, Nakia, Bruno, Zoe, Amir, and and Carmen. I'll get to Carmen in a second. There was something cool about just seeing them, being in a school in Coles together, taking out damage control, or doing their best to take out damage control. I thought that was like, as a fan of these characters, it was cool to see them like doing that kind of thing. It was cool. I'm not gonna lie. But before I get to actually, you know what? This is where I would start getting numbers. Carmen is also, just like Zoe, Carmen was a nothing character in this show. Although he had his moments of being really likable, especially in the second episode, I felt like because like at the expense of making him likable, they took away his villainous charm that he had in the comics, as well as his entire motivation. Because I could see like how with just a couple of easy fixes, you could have made him just as compelling and just as cool of a villain as he was in the comics. And there were moments in the finale where they were alluding to him becoming a villain, but it was handled so sloppily in that finale, because literally in the span of the 40 minutes that was that episode, it's like his emotions were changing on a whim. Like it was on a seesaw. Sometimes he was likable and charming, like in the second episode, and other times he was like villainous and tortured and angry, like he was in the comics. So it was like an inconsistent seesaw that was just going through, up and down, up and down. And I didn't really appreciate that. I thought the actor that played him did a great job for the material that he was given. And I feel like with better material, he could have been a really great version of this character. But this character, as it stands, that he played in the show, was not my favorite by any means. And this is where I started getting the negatives, because with characters like Kareem was complete. Like, I could see some people making the argument that Kareem was along the same lines as he was in the comics, and upon reflection, Kareem as a character, sure, I can agree with that. Even though I did not like how he was introduced, I certainly did not like how the Red Dagger mythos was explained. That was horrible and took out all the uniqueness away from Kareem's character, because literally the whole point of Kareem becoming the Red Dagger was because of the fact that he saw that his city was getting worse and worse because of looters and bandits and everything taking like water and the materials that they needed to survive, and people were constantly leaving Karachi because they didn't want to deal with it anymore. And his whole motivation was like, well, if nobody's trying to fix the problem and be here for Karachi, then who will? And so he decided that he would be the one. So he took the mantle of Red Dagger and decided to become a hero to save his city and make his city better, so that the people, the citizens of Karachi, could live better lives there. And Kamala saw this when she went over to Karachi, which, they had gotten to know each other before they saw each other as Red Dagger and as Miss Marvel. And they had gotten to know each other on a personal level for weeks before they ever saw each other in their alter egos. And this, it's so messy. Being introduced in an action sequence was horrible. Not to mention the action sequence itself was also horrible. It was so bad. And then saying that the Red Dagger is a mythos that's been a part of this super secret organization of a whole mythos of Red Dagger. It was horrible. And a complete misunderstanding of the character. And yeah, and the clandestines were horrible. These are some of the worst villains I have ever seen. Not only were they incredibly useless, and with them along with this stupid Bengal responsible for the destruction of this show and the iteration of this character, but they had no significance to the story. Their plot was useless. If you I'm telling you, they were so useless. And the fact that they chose to make these random villains that aren't even from the comics and that are so haphazardly done and stupid, and they chose that rather than to choose an actual villain from Kamala's rogues gallery of villains, is insulting. It's why couldn't you have someone like the Inventor be the villain of this season? You had plenty of Easter eggs, Easter eggs to the Inventor, in the opening montage where Kamala is doing her fanfiction thing. You see a little picture of a parrot or a parakeet, which is a direct reference to the fact of the Thomas Edison clone. And then you had Edison Electric on the top where Kamala and Bruno were talking in the first episode yet again. So it's they were alluding to the fact that the Inventor could have been a thing, or that he is someone that is out there. Yet they didn't do him. It's ridiculous. And they chose worse villains to do. It was horrible. And they the clandestines, the Bengal, this whole rush, and I do mean rush and butchering of the Karachi storyline that in the comics is really meaningful and impactful and really a huge development when it comes to Kamala's character, because literally the whole point of her going to Karachi was to get away from all the issues that she was facing because of Civil War II, because of Bruno wanting to get away from her because of the situations that were happening, because of losing Carol as a figure that she could look up to. And she went through a lot, and she went through Karachi to get away from everything and to see family and she spent weeks doing just that, going horseback riding and praying at mosques and hanging out with family and doing all these things. And it wasn't until weeks later to where she became Miss Marvel to fight some crime. And she had that beautiful Karachi makeshift suit, which they had the audacity to put in the end credits, when that suit didn't even make its way into the show anyway, so what's the point? It was almost insulting how they handled the Karachi storyline. And again, the ties with family and the whole flashbacks to Aisha and I forget the other guy's name. If this was season 3, where the entire season was dedicated to the Karachi storyline, and we got this story as flashbacks, kind kind of like how Arrow did its episodes, like flashback scenes to Aisha and going back to Kamala and what she's going through right now. That would have been so much better. And the episodes with Aisha and everything, like that one episode, it wasn't bad. As a matter of fact, if anything, I say my only issue with it as an episode is the fact that it was the 5th episode in this 6-episode season, and the fact that it was rushed. Like, if it was an hour long, I feel like that would have given us more time to care about the storylines that they were going through, that she was going through. And if you had given more development to the clandestines and changed their backstory from being convoluted and stupid to actually making sense and having actual, like, bearing on Kamala's character, I feel like those small improvements would have been so much better. But the fact that they were rushed, they were put into the season when the season did not need these things, and the fact that they just felt so abrupt and out of nowhere. That's why I get so angry that these elements were in the show. It's not because I don't think they're necessary, because in all reality, if it was handled better, I would be praising the fact that they decided to add these elements. It's just the fact that they weren't done in the way that they could have been, which was they could have been done a whole lot better than they did it in the show. And you know, it was just wasted opportunity at the end of the day. So, you know, I'm trying to think, is there anything else I need to talk about? I think yeah, and then like I hope that her powers get back to normal, because there were some like teases. Like, for example, in the final episode, her finally saying the magic word, that being embiggen, and her like, you know, her like actually looking like she's embiggen, even though that's not nearly as big as she can get when she embiggens. But for what they were able to do, I thought it was the only time where I liked how it looked. And you know, that was one tease. And then there were certain teases where like she had the stretched out legs, that was another tease. And then in the end credits where it's alluded to that she shapeshifted into Carol, like in the first volume, where after she gets hit by the Terrigen Mist, she shapeshifts into Captain Marvel. And, you know, I think, you know, that's fine, but I just feel like if they had not changed her powers, comic book fan, like, we would not have as big of an issue as we do with this show. And, I mean, you know, there are plenty of other things that are issues, like them completely abandoning the main characters to tell this story that was incredibly out of place and didn't even amount to anything, if I'm being honest. And that's a shame, because the Karachi storyline should mean something. It should be important to Kamala's character, but it wasn't. Like, by the first time, because like that scene where she looks in the mirror, right? Like in the first episode where she looks in the mirror and she's got the Captain Marvel costume on for Avenger Con, and she, you know, she doesn't feel confident with how she looks. And then compared to the final episode where she's in the actual suit and she's like, yeah, this is more like it. I feel like I never felt like there was a progression. So when that happened, I was like, okay, cool. And honestly, like, I don't even like the fact that her mother was the one to make it. Like, if it was me making that decision, I feel like it would have been better if Bruno made that suit, the MCU suit, which was more like tacky and, MCU-ified. And then, like, in future seasons or future installments, whatever they choose to do, like, it gets banged up and she's not really able to use it anymore. So, and this is when her mother would find out that she is Miss Marvel. Or, let's just say, not focusing on my rewrite, because, again, that's coming soon. But, let's just say, like, she already knows she's Miss Marvel, and she sees that her suit is banged up, she can't use it anymore. So Ami says, hey Beta, I have made this suit just for you. And she opens it, and it's the original Miss Marvel costume, the one from the comics. For me, I feel like that would have been a much better transition than her mother, than Ami just making the MCU-ified suit. To me, that's just wasted potential. But, honestly, that's how I would sum up this entire show. Because, and also, before I get to my final thoughts, like, I feel like the character endings weren't really that satisfying at the end of the day, because especially when it comes to Zoe and Nakia, because they tease in this final episode their quote-unquote relationship. And I say quote-unquote because they're supposed to be really good friends, but when it comes to, like, when Zoe revealed that she liked Nakia turned her down because, she liked her more as a friend, not as, like, a romantic partner. And then after that, their friendship got stronger because of that. But there is no, like, there was no established bond between the two of them. There wasn't. So when it comes out of nowhere, especially after both characters were gone for multiple episodes, barely spent any time with each other, like talking or getting to know each other, like that's hollow. It's like they expect, like, comic book fans, just because they had that relationship in the comics, they expect it to work instantaneously because of that knowledge that we have from the comics. I'm like, no. You should make it stand on its own instead of just relying on the knowledge of the comics to drive the emotion. And because to me, the comics are the real story. Every single thing that is made outside of the comics is an interpretation of the story, but not the real story. Like, the comics are the real story of Kamala Khan for me. So, you gotta make this iteration stand out on its own. And every attempt that they took at that failed epically. So, overall, I feel like this show is an incredibly mixed bag. Because, like I said before, when it comes to episode 1, episode 2, bits and pieces of episode 3 and episode 6, like, it's like on some Scott Pilgrim versus the World and Diary of a Wimpy Kid, and it's on that level of accuracy. But then at the same time, on the other side of it, you have the majority of episode 3, and then episode 4 and episode 5, and then on top of that, the power change and everything. That is so rushed, and the butchered characters, to where it is so rushed, so stupid, so inaccurate, so immensely wrong, to the point where it's like on some Last Airbender and Dragon Ball Evolution style of inaccuracy and just overall crap. And it's unfortunate because if this show had kept going in the right direction, if it continued to be like episode 1 and episode 2 and even episode 6, it could have easily been one of my favorite shows of all time. It could have easily been one of my favorite Marvel shows of all time. Right up there with Cloak and Dagger and Runaways and the Defenders Saga and Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and Agent Carter. It could have been up there with those shows. And in terms of the iteration of my big 3, it could have ranked so high. But because of all of the very, very underutilized, very damaged, and very just unnecessary changes and wasted time and wasted potential, it doesn't. It is in the category of being not only a mixed bag, but a massive disappointment. As someone who is a fan of the comics and a fan of Kamala Khan's story and the story of these characters, Kamala, Bruno, Nakia, Zoe, Mike, aka Michaela, even though she wasn't in the show. And that's another thing. There are so many characters missing. Where is Josh? Where is Taisha's brother? Mike, I'll give them, because if they were to introduce Mike, it should be in follow-up seasons, not in the first season. But like, where are these characters? There are so many characters that are missing from this iteration, and it's so strange. But at the end of the day, I would end up giving this show a 50 out of 100. And the reason why I give it a 50 is because when the show is good and faithful, and you know, I'm not, like I've said before, I'm not one of those people that is like for 100% comic book accuracy. Like that stuff, like 100% comic book accuracy would be great. But I am not opposed to creators taking liberties, because, you know, like the creators of this character and even some of the writers and stuff were involved in the making of this show, which, knowing that, I don't understand why this show ended up the way it did if the original writers and creators were involved. But nevertheless, you know, I'm not opposed to creative liberties. If you want to take creative liberties, that's fine. It's just the creative liberties have to not take away from the characters that you're inheriting. They cannot take away from the main point of the story. And in this, the creative liberties just went too far, in my opinion. But when it's really good, it's really good. But when it's really bad, it's really bad. And as a fan of this story, as a fan of these characters, this show is unfortunately in the category of a massive disappointment. And to say my final comments before I end this video, there were a lot of people saying that it was like on par with a Disney Channel show. And that got me so excited, because that would be the perfect feel for this show. Like a Disney Channel show mixed with like the high school elements of like the Homecoming series, right? Because really, when you look at Spider-Man Homecoming, or any of his appearances before No Way Home, literally those should have been Kamala Khan stories. And I feel like the only reasons why they weren't is because Captain Marvel wasn't introduced yet, and having Kamala Khan come first before Captain Marvel would obviously be a bit weird. So, you know, but because I love the Disney Channel, I've loved the Disney Channel ever since I was a kid, and I still love the Disney Channel to this day. And if it would have had that feel, it would have been perfect. You think, like, it makes me so happy watching Zombies 3. Good movie, by the way. It made me so happy watching Zombies 3 and seeing the recommendations and having the Miss Marvel show in line with like other like Disney Channel things. That made me feel so happy because if the show had if the show had that vibe, right? And it did, like in the first episode and even the second episode and the final episode and bits and pieces of the third episode, it had that vibe. But the problem was it didn't stay with that vibe. And, you know, it was unfortunate. Like, at the end of the day, this show is just a show of missed opportunities. And I would say, you know, get them next time. But the fact that the show is kind of failing when it comes to ratings, which I don't really care about, I was not rooting for this show to succeed anyway. Even though it ended up being good, just the mentality that the studio took to make it, I wasn't rooting for it to succeed. And you all know that. But, you know, I do wish that it could have been better. And also, the studio doesn't know how to make TV shows, as I've said numerous times before, so I'm not really surprised that this one was butchered, but because it had such potential with those opening episodes and the filmmaking was astronomically good and the stylization and everything was great, and also the little New Jersey representation with the end credits. And because there are a lot of locations in that end credit scene that I've been to and that I know. And, you know, some of the overhead shots, and I don't know if they filmed like any of the actual like scenes in New Jersey, but still. You know, at the end of the day, it's just disappointing, that's all. I'm not losing sleep over it because this is not the real story of Kamala Khan. And, you know, the real story of Kamala Khan is still going and still going strong, so I'm not losing sleep over this. But it is disappointing. It is disappointing. And I do feel bad for anyone whose first exposure to this character was this show. Or first exposure to these characters, these amazing characters. I feel bad for whoever's first exposure to it was this show. I do feel bad. So yeah, 50 out of 100. It has been an interesting ride with this show, but if I'm being 100% honest, I am 100% glad that it's over. So yeah, I am Jaden Haidara, aka SpyFan101, saying peace.